everyone. I'm Cynthia Corsetti, executive coach, author, and speaker, specializing in succession planning and dedicated to helping CEOs develop a strong and sustainable leadership bench. Welcome, everyone, to this executive roundtable where we're set to explore the fascinating world of disruption in industry. We have an incredible lineup of industry leaders here today, and we're looking forward to hearing their individual and collective insights. Collective thinking is so powerful. Each of these leaders has already taken part in our Authority Magazine interview series on driving disruption, and their interviews were really well received. In fact, they were so well received that we wanted to bring them together and set a stage where their collective thinking can provide insights for all leaders who want to drive disruption in their industries. So I'm going to begin with a very brief introduction of each of our participants. And I say brief because there are 6 of them, and I don't want to go through all the bios. However, the links to their original articles, as well as their websites, will be provided to everyone after they see the video. So today with us, we have Craig Huffman, co-founder and CEO of Metro Edge Development Partners. James Campbell, co-founder and CEO of Cato Security. Tim Taylor, co-founder and president of America Succeeds. Jeff Uphughes, CEO of DC Blocks. Eric Ritter, founder and president of Digital Neighbor. And David Flynn, CEO of Hammer Space. Today, we're going to discuss a few things. We're going to talk about the essence of disruption, disruption's impact on leadership. Something we've all done in disruption in our industries is face resistance. So we're going to talk a little bit about what it's like to face resistance. And then hopefully by the end of the call, we're going to come up with some best practices, 5 or 6 things that we agree collectively that all leaders should know about driving disruption. So to begin, each of you shared your personal definition of industry disruption in your Authority Magazine interview. So I'd like to spend just a brief moment for each of you to define industry disruption in only one sentence. And let's just start with Craig.
I've been listening to a lot of books about entrepreneurs, particularly ones that touch data centers. And one of the things that consistently comes to mind is leadership, because I think in order to disrupt, you have to have a vision that others may not yet have, and you have to be willing to be committed to it, even when others are doubting.
Okay, great. How about James?
In one sentence, that's hard, but, really fundamentally, innovation, feel free to question the status quo and conventional wisdom and, truly believe in what you're doing and take the right people along for the ride. So, for me, that's it in a nutshell, in a sentence.
Okay. Tim?
For me, I think it's confidently creating a better alternative and leading people towards that better outcome.
Awesome. Jeff?
Good morning. For me, it's all about culture, and a purpose-driven culture that you define with core values as well as strategic pillars that you do not deviate from is the foundation for which all companies can scale.
Oh, man is speaking my language. Okay. Eric.
Yeah. Hey, good morning from my side as well. In the context of my side of things with advertising marketing, for me, disruption is really the way technology with innovation is helping get things done.
Great. David?
For me, it's recognizing the tipping point when the impossible becomes possible and can change how the game is done.
Awesome. So each of you talked just a little brief snippet of how you view disruption. So I'm going to ask you to consider a question. Let's say that a traditional manufacturing business is faced with a new competitor that leverages AI to drastically reduce cost. How should the traditional business respond based on what you and your colleagues shared about your philosophies of disruption? Anyone want to start that conversation?
Well, I'll jump in. When facing competition, it doesn't really matter what your assets are. It doesn't really matter what your costs are. If you're able to create an emotional connection with your customers by listening to them and frankly, just doing what they ask you to do. If you have that trust, can operate with teamwork and operate with tenacity on behalf of your customers, it doesn't matter what someone pays in disruption and price, because they'll pay more if you can't get to there based upon the foundation of your partnership.
Right. Who wants to add?
And resonating with Jeff there. So it's not my story. I've stolen it from another founder, but it was really interesting to me. was they talked about just following their competitors, so like being obsessed with their competitor, and then they kind of lost face with their customers, and they ended up kind of down a path which their competitor was on, and that wasn't their strong point. And to Jeff's point, it's like kind of, you know, focus on you and yourself and kind of what you're doing. So from on the AI point, it'd be, you know, rather than just jumping straight on the bandwagon, it's kind of understanding why are they jumping on the bandwagon? Is this right for us? And is this something our customers actually need and going to get value out of us?
Yeah, I agree 100%. Like what was said before, it's really focusing in on things such as understanding the customer, creating that emotional connection, and being compassionate, right? Those things that AI can't do and the machines can't, where it's still humans, right, are who doing business and talking to each other. So really maybe going that extra mile to kind of focus on yourself versus what the competitors are doing and how you can be more compassionate and make that connection out there and stand out.
I may be a little more doomsday in this answer. And that is, I think you really have to understand how a competitor can disrupt your business, meaning, are you in typewriters when computers are rising, right? I think oftentimes complacency becomes one of the greatest challenges for any business. Success leads to comfort. Comfort can lead to tough times, right? Because you're not focused the same way you are when you're building the business. I think Jeff Bezos has said it, your margin is my opportunity, right? And so Amazon has made a business out of looking at margins in businesses and basically going after them. And so I think you have to be vigilant. I think you have to understand that if you truly have a disadvantage and you no longer have an advantage in a market, you may have to assess, can we still compete? And if we can, you know, make decisions decisively. But if there still is an opportunity, adding in some of the human touch, adding in the elements that differentiate from just a cold transaction, because I still think the best business deals are relational, not just purely transactional. So I guess, you know, assess your market opportunity and then understand what is your advantage or disadvantage. And then if there are ways to be more relational, establish the human touch, that's great. But sometimes you run into a situation where you're the typewriter in a computer industry, right?
That kind of reminds me of Kodak. And I'm unwilling to change into the digital realm when they needed.
Or think of BlackBerry, right? I'm old enough to remember, I love BlackBerry, right? I could type a term paper on a BlackBerry. And yet BlackBerry lost its competitive advantage to a company that, you know, I laughed and said, what's Apple going to do for a smartphone, for a CEO, for an executive? And lo and behold, I couldn't imagine living without my iPhone, right? Or my iPad.
Awesome. Who else has something they want to add?
I'd jump in on this one. I think that what's been said, and in particular, Craig sort of pulling it back to reality, running a business is really hard. This is all about threading the needle of having a great culture, having core values, having a North Star that your company believes in that is consistent, and then still trying to respond to other things that are happening in the market, being innovative at the same time. You can't just have fits and starts because a competitor does something. You've got to stick to your North Star. You've got to stick to your culture. At the same time, you've got to manage all of these other things of where is the market going? What are other competitors doing that are going to get out front and outpace you? And can you respond? And are they significant responses in the market, right? Everybody's always trying to do something. And if you respond to every one of them, you'll never be successful in the work you're trying to do at your company and lead the people, right? Companies are all about people and leading with compassion and being a heart-led leader. One of my favorite sort of approaches to leadership. This just points out how difficult this is, and being in that leadership seat are making these decisions and small decisions, most often small decisions every single day. I think it's very rare to make a really, really enormous decision in our companies, but a lot of small decisions, little bets add up to big bets.
Yeah, it's all about a balanced approach, really. Kind of calling it back, thanks, Craig, from the utopia. But definitely, it's all about a balanced approach at the end of the day. And as Tim says, it's all about little bets. And you know what? You also have to remind yourself you can't win everything too. And it's about what you learn from that and how you put that back into, the way forward as well.
And anyone else want to add to that? Anyone else?
Well, I'd say, you really need to plan enough in advance on this to be the one to act, not react. to be on the attack with it. The question as you posed it is a difficult one for me because I wouldn't want to be in that situation in the first place. And that means there were these tiny decisions that needed to be made quite a long time ago to not get in that position in the first place. So, it's really about having the presence of forethought on where the industry is going and what needs to be done so that it only takes minor adjustments to be at the right place at the right time by following your North Star, like my fellow CEOs put it.
So that brings us, it is an excellent segue into the next topic, which is about how disruption impacts leadership. And James, in your article, you say that conventional wisdom is useful as guidance, but never trusted as gospel. Can you tell us how that philosophy impacts how you lead your organization through change?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, to be honest, in early stages of the company, it was quite hard not to take it as gospel because we were starting in a category that didn't exist. We're trying to innovate. We're trying to be the first movers in a market. And so it's hard not to take it as gospel. But then you start realizing that, no one else has trodden on this path. So that gospel can also be your undoing as well. And certainly I had, both ends of the spectrum whenever it comes to advice. And we've gone through a period of banks collapsing, COVID, economic crisis, war now, the industry going up, the industry going down, the industry kind of coming back. And, there is no playbook for this. No one else has trotted this path before. And so really, what we like to do is just be well educated in our playbook, our own written story and our own journey and towards the North Star, as Tim says. We do just take in the advice from those who have been there and done that, those who also haven't, just from an independence perspective. And then we work out what the right path is for us. And that's how we lead. And that comes from top down. You have to make those calls, those decisions. Again, lots of small decisions, lots of baby steps, lots of balancing, owning it as well when you haven't made the right one or you're kind of going down the wrong path. You have to kind of retrack and, really just show confidence in that and, help the team see the vision and believe in it as well and why, this is the right way of going forward.
Yeah, I think one thing that we have to always keep in mind as senior leaders is that our leadership skills need to be duplicated like 100 times down with all the other leaders in the organization, because it doesn't help if all the great leadership is just at the top. So, Eric, when asked how disruption has changed your thoughts on leadership, you said, don't wait your turn. I'd love for you to expand on that.
My philosophy a lot of times is move fast and break things, right? Which I think I stole from Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook, right? We've all seen that the Facebook interface changes all the time. And people aren't happy, but yet Meta is still one of the biggest companies ever out there, right? And so that's something I try to fully embrace as well, is if we don't get it right the first time, at least we are learning from this, right? Versus just waiting and not doing anything, being proactive versus reactive. And so that's from the top down, from the leadership style, is let's ask for forgiveness, not for permission. Of course, with some guide rails up on the sides there when we're working with our clients, working with our partners there. But that's something that is really important to me, is we don't want to be passive or we don't want to be reactive. We definitely want to be active and get in front of things before they've come. And that's something we talked about before, right? If you're in a situation, there was decisions before that got you maybe into that corner. And so that's where my philosophy of don't wait your turn comes in, is if something new's out there, let's try it out. Let's try to make this work versus seeing the competitor do it before us.
Awesome. Jeff, you mentioned both tenacity and the servant mentality as both being key factors in leading an organization through disruption. How have you been able to balance the two?
Well, many of it is, I learned it's the people for which you hire, and do they have a natural servant mentality and embody much of your culture. We also kind of take the same approach of the tenacity portion. I believe that the speed of the leader is the speed of the team. And can you cultivate people around you that have the same sense of urgency? Sense of urgency, people either have it or they don't. And when you're interacting with customers in a serving mentality, you have to remove yourself and saying, what can I do to help you? Because we can't do this without you, whether it's a business partner that helps you create your product or service, whether it's a community for which you're in and serving, or whether it's the team that you have around you. And, it's a fine balance in doing that. But, I believe that being present and being out front in front of your clients, your customers, your employees, and doing so in a way that says, I work for you, but this is the direction we're going in, the speed for which we're going in, the culture and the engagement of a serving mentality. I mean, for us, we call it serving locally and connecting globally on behalf of our customers. And we live that every single day. We show up and we serve with our calendars and what we do in our communities. We show up with our checkbooks and how we can be good citizens, and we put others first. And having that mentality really helps along the way with customers and everybody we meet.
All right. David, you expressed that as you moved up through the ranks to CEO, you had to distance yourself from that engineering mindset a little bit. Do you believe that this mindset shift helped your organization disrupt your industry?
Well, early on, there was a feeling that I needed to switch roles away from the engineering mindset. What I later learned and became more successful because of it was that needed to maintain my presence there in the engineering firm, even though it's kind of awkward as a CEO, and, conventional wisdom might be otherwise. And, now I've simply surrounded myself with people that are very capable, and it allows me to continue to stay involved in the area, that I came up in through the engineering side. And as a tech company, that's really quite important. So, it's, I think, refreshing to stay involved. And now that the company and the culture is built around the assumption that even the leaders are very directly involved, I think that has made a positive difference.
Okay, great. Tim, you mentioned that as a leader, you were faced with a disruptive dilemma. Should we place all our eggs in one basket, or should we use the pandemic as a catalyst for change? Would you like to explain how you made the choice?
Sure. One of the things I love so much about how everybody has responded to this question is how culture has been built into it, how leaders are willing to take a little bit of risk and try and minimize that risk as they've made big decisions. I assume that the pandemic put a lot of people in a position where they had to make difficult decisions, or where they were trying to figure out what was going to come next. A lot of people didn't make it through the pandemic with their companies too. Yeah, we were faced with a decision where we had to pivot. And if we did not evolve and pivot during the pandemic, we weren't going to make it. We weren't going to make it through. And I mentioned little bets earlier. There was a point in time where we sort of had to make a big bet. And fortunately, it worked out. I think culture goes back to the team being willing to do that. We have a bias for action in our organization. Nobody in our organization will ever get in trouble for trying something and having it not work. They're far more likely to have a conversation with me that they wouldn't like to have if they were too timid about something where there was really an opportunity in front of them. Failing fast, I think that sort of goes back to what Eric was talking about. Fail fast, learn from it, and move on. But I guess for the general and for the audience, right? When you make a big decision, the thing is to go all in and to stick with it. When we put those eggs in the other baskets, I had to be confident in that decision. We had to find the best way to move forward, given the opportunities that were in front of us, and make the best of it. And we're really fortunate that it worked out in our favor in this case. But it's not the way that I like to operate. But I don't think anybody's ever faced a global pandemic before, right? I think all of us probably had to make decisions at that time that we would have preferred not to have made.
Yeah, right. Craig, you used the same word as Jeff did. In your interview, you said that tenacity has been an anchor for you. Can you elaborate on how that helped you be disruptive?
Absolutely. I mean, entrepreneurship is hard stop. I think a lot of people have fancy ideas of how luxurious it can be. I think it can be, but you have to pay your dues, right? So for me, tenacity comes with it. Any business that gets started is challenging. And if you are inclined to quit, you're never going to get there. I mean, for me, I come from a commercial real estate background. My last business navigated the Great Recession, which was a lot of fun. Not when you own commercial real estate, now all values are declining. So the tenacity that I had to have in that company is relevant in a company like the one I'm running now, in part because doing anything new is hard. You know, we're building an urban data center in a location in a city that historically has been adversarial to data center development. And so for us, it was not just the challenges of, hey, can we get the power? Can we line up the site? Can we design it right? Can we also deal with government officials that are adversarial to our position, right? Well, how can we educate them? How can we help them understand the value add? Because oftentimes I think business leaders will be dismissive of government leaders or bureaucrats, depending on which one you want to call them, or both, and maybe not understand that you have to educate, right? And that requires a different level of commitment. And again, using that word tenacity, right? A willingness to just keep fighting and fighting and fighting and pushing, even when it seems as though the task is far more daunting than your energy or effort may allow.
So each of you got to talk a little bit about your own philosophies on leadership through disruption. Do you have questions for your colleagues? Anything anyone said that you would like to chime in on or ask for more detail on?
I think it's been refreshing to hear other perspectives and similar perspectives on it. Quite validating to hear. I like the emphasis on culture.
Yeah, it's definitely some common themes here, and also refreshing as well to hear it from others. Because, as a leader, you kind of, one of my investors says it's the loneliest position you can be in. You've got a big team behind you, but really kind of out there on your own. And I think having this sort of conversation with other leaders is refreshing and helpful as well, when kind of you see these common themes and common things that I do as a leader come across as well, which is great.
Yeah, I think Elon Musk may have said entrepreneurship is like staring into the abyss while chewing on glass, right? It's not for the faint at heart.
I prefer to be staring at abyss with a beer in my hand.
Yeah, there you go.
That's more my style.
You wash down the glass with a little bit of beer, right?
Exactly. That's my Australian way.
Yeah. No, this is great. I mean, I think it's great to have perspectives. I think at the end of the day, you hear themes here. There's a need for a vision. There's a need for conviction. There's a need for empathy. I mean, you really have to wear a lot of different hats because it requires you to adapt and change situationally. And that's the part that I think the average everyday person may not understand. And sometimes we get into debates about what does a CEO do and should people be paid a lot of money and blah, 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 all this discussion about populist thinking. But, I think it's a function of value added. If you create value, I think there's value that the value creation should be compensated.
Absolutely. I think one of the other things that resonated with me with this group was just having faith in your team as well. So I forget who said it, was Jeff or Tim, but it's you can't do all the things. You'll certainly get people trying to be leaders out there, and they try and do all the things, and they just burn out, and the team doesn't follow them as a result. Was on top of that, so it's kind of giving your team the vision and the kind of tools to kind of help get to that vision, but having faith that they themselves can replicate you and go out there and empower the wider company to go after your vision.
Yeah, I also think it's a great point. I think you also have to understand that as your company matures or the company gets bigger, your role changes a lot. I used to find that I was the chief that was out in front, meeting with every customer, talking to every single one, being in part of every part of the conversation. And as you grow, you're consistently replacing yourself with other leaders that are there, and then giving them enough rope that they can go out and make the decisions, make mistakes. But it's kind of like you got the noose around your neck, and you've got 4 legs of the stool. You want to be able to say, look, I'm going to have, 2 legs of the stool kicked out from underneath you. You're going to be balancing pretty hard, but I'm not going to let you fail. And how do we do this together? And, so it's constantly morphing your own mentality as well of, how your job as a CEO changes. And, today mine has changed quite a bit from when we first started out. I mean, we started out and, I had 4 people in the company when we came in, where it was something where the investors said, what the hell do we invest in? Where do we go? And that has turned from 4 people to now almost 70. And the growth of what we are doing at a 92% compounded annual growth rate is just causing us to think, okay, what are the next gaps of what we have in scale? Do the people that we have in the roles, are they capable of going to the next level? They may be great people, but you may have to find other areas for them to remain focused and still contributing to the company, but they may not be able to get you there. And the same thing goes for investors. It goes for your team. It goes for a lot of people, but just do so and treating people with respect and understanding. It goes well beyond you. You've got a responsibility to really look at it on behalf of your investors, your customers, as well as your team, and say, we're going to put people in the right roles where they can succeed. And you have to be able to do that with a lot of empathy, is what I heard before, and do that with a mind of how are we going to get to where we are? Because what got us to where we are now won't get us to where we want to go.
I think that's a very good point. Having to find the right role for people and the challenges with adjusting roles, the need for compassion and empathy, but to still also be decisive. That's some of the biggest challenges is just, making sure you have the right talent in the right place and can navigate the changes that are necessary as the organization grows. It's not easy.
Yeah, having those conversations. We had our former CTO that was all driven on product. Hey, I want to get into the weeds. I want to, create things that help on different systems and tools. And that was a big move for us when we said, look, I'm moving you from this role. I really need you to tackle this corp dev role. And how do you do that? And be partnering with our best and largest customers and open those up, and then shifting operations and shifting, the things what we did. One wouldn't call it a pivot. I just called it organizational alignment. And, when you have alignment of interests with your investors and alignment of interests with your team, and you've built that trust, teamwork, and tenacity, as I mentioned before, people will follow your lead. They just need more context. Hey, here's what I believe it can happen. Here's what I believe can be done. I believe in you that you're the guy to do this, or you're the gal to do this. Let me help you succeed, but this is the mission we have to go do. And when you're giving people the context and doing that, amazing things can happen. And we've been really blessed and fortunate to have pulled off all that we have. But it hasn't been without risk and challenge.
I love the consistency of the themes that we've been circling around for the entire call, and how much head nodding there is when somebody's talking, right? I think being a great leader and right, showing up, I always feel like, at least early in my career as I've gone on, it maybe a little bit less so, but showing up and not knowing what was going to happen in any given day as an entrepreneur and being ready to solve problems has been really an important feature. And coaching and mentoring the people who are in the organization at the same time. But I think everybody, in the way that we're talking about our leadership role and values and leadership and our compassion for our employees, is very consistent. There's a lot of ways to run a company into the ground, but there's only a handful of ways to keep a company being successful. And all of the themes that we keep talking about here, it seems like everybody is very much committed, and you see sort of a tight grouping of the comments and the head nodding that's going on as one person's talking and the others, because the folks who have been able to navigate this and do this well are really focused on a handful of things. And those are the most important things. And then you have to address some of the other things that come up. But really, your values, your North Star, the way you treat people at your company, you got to get those right.
So each of you, in facing disruption in your industries, must have faced resistance. Can you talk about how you had to adapt your leadership style or change your path? We won't use the word pivot or realign. What did you do when you faced the biggest resistance?
I guess that would depend on where the resistance comes from. When the resistance is external, that's a good sign you're on the right track. Whether, if it comes external, from the competition or from the industry writ large, folks operating under conventional wisdom, when there's the opportunity to upend conventional wisdom because you've reached a tipping point where, technology can be used in a new way to be disruptive. If the resistance comes internally, then it's the tough decision of trying to recognize how much truth there is to it, what the motivations of the people are, what can be learned from it, or what needs to be corrected in the makeup of the team. And those changes are always disruptive. And I would say, if you run an organization like the folks here have been talking about, then, typically these things don't come up unless it's because of of a need to make a change on the team, because, we all try to listen and adapt to things, make changes proactively in advance. And yet at the same time, you want to give people a long leash. You want them to have every opportunity to succeed and continue to enable them. But there are certain points in time when, personalities being what they are or whatnot, and changes have to be made. So it really does matter from what direction is the resistance coming from. Sometimes it's a really good thing when it's the competition who's trying to impugn things, then you're on the right track.
On the internal kind of point for myself, and kind of reflecting back to the North Star or the vision, one thing I've certainly learned and taken on board is that the vision will be obvious to you as the leader, as the person who created the vision, but it's not necessarily so obvious to everyone else around you. And so really you've got to make sure you're explaining it in a way in which, they can get on board and see, actually, yeah, there's something here. And so when I have that conversation, when people kind of resistant against kind of doing X, Y, Z, towards the vision or the goal, because they just, don't get it, in quotes. It's not because they don't get it. It's because I'm not explaining it in a way which resonates with them or the way that they think. And so I actually put it back onto myself to go, right, why don't they get it? And then kind of go back to the drawing board, come back and say, look, hey, here are your concerns. This is my way of thinking around your concerns, and this is why I still think this is the best way forward. And normally that's quite a good constructive argument, and the fact that you've had that backwards and forwards as well, I think resonates really well with the team, and then you kind of get on board at that point and go for it. But with resistance internally, okay, sure, there might be a cultural thing, definitely should solve those cultural issues and get on those really, really early, otherwise they can bleed out into nasty things. But certainly at the same time, it's kind of, if someone doesn't get it, then it might be because you're just not explaining it in a way which, resonates or they understand. So it's good exploring that as well.
David said something that I'm curious if everyone agrees with, that when you're facing the resistance from external, that's could be a good thing. Is there a time when it's not a good thing? When you're in disruption, you're disrupting your industries, you're making a change. So when you're facing that resistance, is it good? Is it bad externally?
I think it's a good thing, but I'll let other people comment first.
I was like, most of you do. Anyone disagree?
In defense of myself, I think most people are comfortable with the status quo. So the default position is to resist, to stick with the status quo. So you're on the right track, or one of the signs that you're on the right track could be that you're seeing resistance from folks who are being taken out of their comfort zone. And that can actually, be customers too, to some extent. But, definitely when the competition starts to try to hype up the concerns of the status quo, then you're on the right track.
Yeah, that's a great point. Early in my career, somebody told me the only people who like change are a wet baby. So, but to progress is right. Progress is created by disruptors, and that's how it's going to, right. So I think that's a really valid point, is that the vast majority of folks are not that comfortable with change. It is the innovators and the disruptors and the folks who see something better in the future. I think one of the worst things around disruption is to disrupt without a plan to replace what you're trying to do. I think that's just sort of throwing stones. In a company, that's not a really helpful strategy. I'm not sure that's a strategy at all. But being thoughtful, having a plan, seeing something in the future that could be better, and then going after that is, I think, how innovators are changing their industries across the board, right? And at various scales of that, right? The Elon Musks of the world, that is a rare type of vision and ability. But along the way, I think there's a lot of folks who see something better, who want something better in the world, and have gotten into a position of being an entrepreneur and can make that happen. And there's a lot of power and joy and energy and excitement in that. I think that's why we all show up to work every day.
Greg, I'm curious, what's changing dramatically in your industry right now that you see any resistance to from the status quo?
You're talking to the upstart that's trying to break into an industry of, I call it the old boys club. No offense, Jeff. But yeah, I think naturally the comments made about most people want to be in the status quo, even if they believe they're leaning into change. It's just comfortable. what we know versus what we don't know. I will read a quote and then I'll come back to your question. A current visionary is a present liar. That is until the vision becomes a reality. Then the liar is called a prophet. I think that sums it up, right? Vision requires you to look like you're out there. No one can see it, right?
Out
It's like,
on a
what are they
limb.
doing? I listened to a podcast, an interview with the founder and the CEO of NVIDIA. Talk about a company that has disrupted the data center industry and how he had a vision. And many years ago, he started working on things that would position NVIDIA to be the go-to player in the data center world. Early on, when they were in the research and development phase, there were people that were dismissive because NVIDIA was a public company of what are these science projects that are distracting us from our core business? Well, now those very science projects are the things that have given NVIDIA a dominant market position and put it on pace to be I believe they are $1 trillion market cap company. So the point is, while you're engaging in things that are your core business, you have to also keep your eyes around the corner and think about innovation and think about things that will allow you to be relevant and hopefully be a couple steps ahead. That's a difficult balancing act. So for us, it's, navigate a tough landscape politically, just in general, to build a data center, get all the entitlements, and then be in a position to also land an anchor tenant. These are all different functions that typically require much larger teams. And so for us, we've had to break it down and be very tactical with how we approach each one of these functions, because it's harder when you have a small team. But I would also argue, and Jeff, you might agree or disagree, it's a little more fun, right? Because everyone has to lean in. It's the Jeff Bezos quote, if a team meeting doesn't allow you to have one pizza, right, you got too many people on that team. And so you've got to figure out ways to get the best ideas and leverage the energy. At least that's the energy more of a startup in an earlier stage firm. And then as you mature, the roles and the defining and hopefully avoiding the corporate bureaucracy that inevitably comes as a company grows. So a lot of words. Hopefully I gave you some nuggets.
Craig, you mentioned a lot of good quotes, and we've all talked about a lot of good leaders or true visionaries, whether it's Bezos or Elon Musk or others, NVIDIA and other things. If you read Bezos's annual reports, I think on the 20th anniversary, he says, it's always day one. So you're acting like it's day one in every single thing. And, not losing that drive and understanding where you are, it's hard, man. It's hard when you get bigger but you got to remember, we have these team meetings, town halls that we do every single month with all the employees. And, you run through it. And I remember those town halls, there was 6 of us, 5 of us, 6 of us, 8 of us. And, now we're at, approaching 70. And when you have those, it's the forum for keeping people connected. And it's a forum for understanding where you were. We were recanting. We had one yesterday. We were recanting, and Craig, our first data center was 6,000 square feet in a retrofit in a small town of Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Wow.
And so we're like, okay, we're going to take the James T. Kirk approach of boldly going where no man has gone before. We're going out to these markets and we have no idea how it's going to work, but we believe it will work. We're going to turn these things into connectivity exchanges like 350 Cermak in Chicago. And eventually all the cloud guys will come. And, so now you fast forward and we just acquired another piece of property that you'll read about in the news that we're building 750,000 square feet of a new facility of what we're doing in the Atlanta market. We've gone from the edge to the core, not from the core out to the edge. And it's because we had to prove ourselves every day, every minute, every hour. You're just going through every single piece of your business and constantly just leaning into your customers and your employees. And amazing can happen when you work together and keep people connected.
Absolutely.
We don't have anything to add to that? Eric, your industry, tell us how this fits in with what you do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we work primarily with clients, right? Trying to find solutions to problems that they're having, right, on the marketing side of things. So pretty much every recommendation we're giving them when they come to us is disruptive, right? We're trying to help them solve problems with solutions and strategies. So, we talked a little bit earlier about resistance or hesitation there. That happens a lot, right? Like, hey, we've always done it this way. We've always bought newspaper ads. We've always bought billboards, but we're not seeing that ROI anymore, right? And so a lot of it is just education, really is just so important there. And I've been doing this for a long time, so I have a lot of examples and case studies to kind of show, how these small disruptions over time have helped businesses grow, right? That's what my job is, to help bring in more clients, bring in more leads, bring in more customers, whatever their goals are. And a lot of times they don't realize how these things are interconnected, that they say, hey, well, I want to get more sales. I'm like, okay, great. Well, your website doesn't load on mobile or whatever it might be, right? And so for them, that's a huge eye opener there that, oh, well, now I need to worry about that there. So pretty much any kind of recommendation, like I said, is disruptive there. And we touched lightly on AI. It's probably something that I think about twice every hour, to be modest there in my industry, is like, how is that influencing or how's that doing things? I was talking to a colleague who owns another marketing agency, and he said he literally doesn't have copywriters anymore. They just use AI to create all the copy. They have strategists, and the strategists tell the AI what to do, and it writes the copy for them. There's literally, I'm also a professor here at a local university, and the kids come to me, he's like, hey, 2 years ago, I decided I want to be a copywriter. That's not an option for me anymore, right? And so you think about someone, you're pulling someone's entire dream of being a copywriter away from them because that's not needed anymore. So we're still in that phase trying to figure everything out. How is AI, what are we going to end up with, right? We're so much at the beginning of all of the AI and how it's disrupting marketing. I mentioned copywriting. I mentioned giving recommendations and SEO and everything there. And it's not just that side, it's also the Google side of things, right? The search engines or what people are using, they're trying to understand this as well. So on the one side, the way things are getting done is changing, but also the target is moving on us because they're trying to figure out, oh, how are we going to bring up websites? How are we going to show them? How are we going to catalog all this new AI created content there as well? So that's in a nutshell kind of where in the marketing world where I feel like we're still trying to kind of figure all that out. And like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, and it's not just an evolution, it's a full revolution that's happening right now. Is we're not just going from where we were before, but now we need to figure out there's all these tools out there that make it easier, make it faster, but is it really the right way to do it, right? So Google Bing could one day say, hey, all AI created content, we don't care about it anymore, right? We just want human written content. That's something that could easily happen there. But also on the other side, from a paid standpoint, when you're out there buying ads, I feel like AI has really made things much easier, right? Because now you're not in there manually doing things, but you can start trusting kind of that machine learning and the AI to kind of do those things for you. So for me, as a leader, is really keeping people focused on what's the vision, what's the strategy, what are we trying to accomplish here, versus like me, what I just did, getting lost in the weeds and the minutia of everything, but really thinking about high level of what are we trying to solve here and how can we do that in a future-friendly, sustainable way.
So you brought up something that's actually a topic of one of my next Authority Magazine series is how does AI affect your industries? So I'm curious if anyone else wants to jump in on that because it's a really interesting topic.
I think kind of reflecting on Eric on the education piece, and educating the market, and kind of come to the AI bit on top of that. So my industry, so I work in the digital forensics incident response industry. And as far as the security industry is concerned, to be honest, there's lots of legacy there. There's lots of legacy ways of doing things. How I'm educated on a product coming into wanting to be an incident responder is very similar to how I was educated 20 years ago, which is crazy. It hasn't actually changed much. And still people using the similar products from 20 years ago. And so, that's that reluctancy or to kind of get on board to something new because they're comfortable. And so it's, right for disruption, but in the right way. And the way we're doing that is kind of making it a kind of a familiar journey to the North Star or that disruption kind of, new way of doing things. So trying to do those baby steps and making it familiar for them. So it's a bit of an easier path, not just to do the old way or do the new way. So it's kind of trying to fill that gap in between or build a bridge for them really to come across. And I think AI, just kind of looping back, Cynthia, on your AI point, AI has definitely been one of those where it's met with a lot of skepticism in my industry. And certainly there's a lot of buzzword bingo when you're playing with, the whole AI train, and, we try and avoid it at all costs. And in fact, we've got a ban on the use of word AI unless we're specifically talking about something like OpenAI or ChatGPT. So, I think we've started exploring ourselves. So I was actually a bit of a naysayer as well, kind of get on the bandwagon. Everybody's just getting on the bandwagon. But we did start experimenting, exploring like practical applications. And okay, yeah, sure. You know what, for the bread and butter of what we do, it's not great, but you know what, there are some bits it can add more value to for a customer. And the way we're focusing on it, in fact, we've done a couple of blogs on it recently and just put something on LinkedIn yesterday, is around, our product makes it easier to respond to incidents in the cloud, but we're like, how do we take it next extra level? How do we kind of like generate a nice user-friendly report off the back of what you found in your cloud environment? And we're like, you know what, how about AI? And so we're testing that, and it's actually producing some pretty good results. Just talking about our experience there, we were actually massive skeptics at the start, but I think what we worked out is like, work out what the right application is for you and what sort of value add will it provide to your customers. Don't just try and jam it in there and make it work at the end of the day. So, and we use it for a very, very, very small kind of part of our product, the bit that we think provide the most value to our customers.
I like how you said building a bridge there as well, right? Because I think that's absolutely the right approach. Pretty much, and we're talking about disruption, any disruption, right? It's kind of, you're not just saying, hey, you did this all the time, let's do this now.
Let's do this.
But what's that path getting from point A to where we can get to the other point there? And so I really like the analogy there of building a bridge there.
Yeah, I use a very stupid analogy internally, and that's to my team, I say, look, if you build the best car in the world, but it looks like a duck, no one is going to buy it. So we need to maybe it looks like a little bit like a duck at the start, but not completely like a duck. And then they drive and they go, oh, wow, this is the best car in the world. And then eventually it looks like a duck. That's fine. No one's going to care because they've driven it and they realize it's the best thing, they've ever driven. So it's kind of a really stupid analogy, but I make it stupid on purpose. I get to get the point across.
The impact of AI on Craig and I's business is like jet fuel on a fire.
Yeah.
You look at it and, everything related to AI in itself, AI runs into a cloud. Well, guess what? The cloud has 4 walls. It's called a data center. And when you have AI, the challenges that are there, it is accelerated the development of new facilities like what Craig has and like what we're building, because the thirst of the major cloud providers, whether it be, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Meta, Oracle, that are driving and consuming 80% of the bandwidth as well as the computing power on the internet. When you're doing things like that in an already supply chain conflicted environment, it makes it very, very difficult to try to keep up. And then add on the complexity of what our customers are requiring from density and the amount of power that is required to power the GPU chips that are needing to be cooled within the facilities, and then the availability of energy, because we do have an energy crisis going on in our country, whether a lot of people know it or not. Just the demands on the grid are becoming harder and harder and harder to solve. So, for us, the AI is, how do we handle this for our largest customers at the same time, trying to help them meet where their forecasts and their demand are, is causing them to buy 3 and 5 years out based upon what they see that this impact of what AI is going to have. So it's a big challenge.
I can share an anecdote from our sector as well. So our organization works at the intersection of what business leaders, employers are looking for out of public education systems. So we partner with public education systems to get better outcomes for kids in states across the country. Big systems change work. As it relates to AI, I heard something recently that just continues to, right, when we talk about innovation and disruption, speaking to a group of superintendents in a state, and the superintendents, somebody raises their hand and says, hey, we do not allow ChatGPT in our district at all. We have just outright banned it. And I think if you look back, this is the way that the system has been forever and ever. When the slide rule was around and the calculator came out, education system says you're not allowed to use a calculator. We don't want you to use that. That's cheating. Well, then we had kids use calculators every day, and we didn't let them practice it in the education system. We have the internet roll around. Well, you can't use any citations from the internet when you're writing a report. You have to go to the library and find a book to use as your citation. And now we have ChatGPT, and these kids are going to use this for the rest of their lives. And the education system doesn't know what to do with it because it can write a paper for a kid. So we just outright ban it, as opposed to saying these kids need to learn how to use ChatGPT every day because it's going to be part of their lives forever and ever. And the systems are just clamping down because of the unknown, of the fear that's going on. And we have example out of the systems doing things the same way it's always done it. And this is why innovation and disruption is so important, because folks are committed to just sort of, the education system does a lot of things well. Innovation and change is not one of them. And so a totally different a thought and approach on AI and what's happening in AI and how we're preparing kids to use AI in the future. And it's not what we need. We got to do better.
I agree. Thanks for sharing that, Tim. I think that's just so important, right? Is starting at an early age. This isn't, I think we can all agree it's not going to go away, right? It's here to stay. So the sooner that we embrace that and make sure that, people at a young age, like I remember when I was a kid, I don't know, the internet was still a new thing, right? It was a big deal getting an email, dialing in and everything. And, in school, that's where, I learned about those kind of things. Like, hey, that's where I had my first email, et cetera, and I think that's what we need to do with AI as well, is that, you have that first contact. So you learn how to use it in a responsible manner, to your point. Yeah, sure. It can write an entire term paper for you, but you really wanted to do that.
David, what's AI doing in your industry? How's it impacting?
Well, the conventional wisdom of move the compute to your data. As you've heard here from Craig and Jeff, the compute is now so large and tethered to power grids and large facilities that they provide that we have to finally solve the problem of how to have data move freely. After all, it's the very definition of digital, and you'd think that it could be moved freely, but we still live in a world where data is very much a prisoner to the storage systems and services where you've housed it. So for me, AI offers us the opportunity to disrupt the world of data operations because it can be used to allow data to be a global resource that is proactively placed in different facilities where you need it. So the use of AI to solve one of the biggest challenges in the AI world of the distribution of data and the serving of data. But it means, coming at it from a different viewpoint. Instead of data gaining its permanence and being served through storage, which we're all very used to, data now will be permanent and served through living in an orchestrated environment. In other words, on the presumption that it's always in motion and usable while it's in motion. And AI is what's going to make that possible because it allows you to proactively have data placed in the many different facilities where it's needed in advance of its use. So finally solve the data nightmare of silos and the janitorial work to copy things around. It's kind of ironic. Nothing more digital than data, and yet how data is mapped and managed onto storage systems couldn't be more manual than it is still today. And so it's in crying need of being disrupted, being digitally transformed, how data operations work.
Yeah. Anyone want to add anything to that? Okay. As we've listened to this discussion and everyone's thoughts on AI and disruption in general and leadership and resistance, I want to give you each a moment to summarize in your own words what you think a young entrepreneur, old entrepreneur, a new entrepreneur in an industry who wants to go through and create disruption, what are the top one or two things that you think that that person needs? I know tenacity is going to be one of them, but I'm curious. Craig, you look like you.
Yeah, this one's a high one because I have a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old, two amazing kids. I love spending time with them. But I tell them all the time, one of the things that you should think about doing in life is solving problems. I believe entrepreneurs solve problems. It really comes down to that, right? I mean, ask why. Why can't we do something? Why can't it be easier to have connectivity in the Southeast? Jeff, I think you came up with a good answer, right? All of the other folks on this link or podcast ultimately found a way to solve a problem, right? Whether it was price-based, whether it was innovation-based. And so I think for a new entrepreneur, if you just want to make money, I think that's pretty shallow and that's probably not going to be the best path, maybe in certain industries, right? But I think if you want to build value, figure out how you're going to solve a problem.
Great.
Yeah, Craig, you had a good point along the lines of problems. Listening to kids. I like you have got a couple of kids, mine are a little bit older. One's 22 and one's 18. And the way my wife and I approach it is we've kind of raised the kids and gone through life and saying there are no problems. They're just puzzles we need to solve. So take the time to focus on solving the puzzles and you'll get to the right answer. And approaching business and, if you have, I think it was, may have been James. I can't remember which one you guys had said it, but you said, if you're going to build like a car that looks like a duck, you're probably not going to sell very many cars. It's the same thing with a product. So, to an entrepreneur, try to solve the puzzle, but do so. You can create the coolest thing that there is in the world, but if there's no market for it, you're not going to sell very many. So don't go trying to solve a problem where there's no market. I like saying fall in love with a market for which you serve, not with a specific customer or customer type. So if you're serving a specific area, fall in love and understand with how you're going to serve that marketplace, but your product may shift from time to time. And where that gets traction, you have to be flexible enough to do it while you try to figure out how to solve that puzzle.
Excellent.
I'll chime in. Just love what you do. Success is you living and breathing it. And someone was like, "Oh, it must be stressful." And I was like, to be honest, this has been the least stressful job I've had. I know I'm doing more hours than I've ever done before, and I'll take calls at all sorts of times in the night and stuff. But you know what? I don't mind that because I'm doing something that I love. I'm working with, I got to pick the people I work with, which is awesome, by the way.
Yeah, but you have to pay them to work with you.
Oh, you do have to pay them. That's true. That's I pretend they're my friends, No, I'm joking. But at the end of the day, you're kind of setting the tone for the culture that you want to be a part of and want to work with. And that's really fun and rewarding as well. But I think I do see a difference between people, as said before, it's like if you're just in it for money, you're probably not going to have a great time. You're probably not going to really enjoy it. Go embrace something that you actually really enjoy, and you want to bring people along for the ride as well, and have them enjoy the journey with you. So, I think that's just number one, and it goes out saying, Jeff, definitely make sure there's a market for that too. So if you've got those two things together, you're going to have a really good time. And even if it's not successful, you're going to learn so much in such a short period of time. Go with your gut and enjoy it.
In schools, one of the things we've heard people say is to start asking kids not what you want to be when you grow up, but to ask them what problem they want to solve. So I think it's just right. I love and asking, right, young people, do you have a passion? Passion's a pretty tall order, but curiosity happens every day. So how do you get kids to follow their curiosity? I love the idea of puzzles, not problems. I think all these things are building towards the exact same thing, right? Get kids to pursue their curiosity, find these things out. If it just happens that you want to become an entrepreneur by following that, right, they need to know how difficult the world of entrepreneurism is. A colleague has told me, right, an entrepreneur is somebody who is willing to work 70 hours a week to avoid working 40.
Sounds about right.
Only 70.
Maybe 80.
Yeah, right. So
if you factor in the time when you're thinking about it, even if you're not sitting at your desk, losing sleep about it.
So yeah, guys, it's Friday. There's only 2 more days left in the work week.
That's That's right. That's about right. It's about right.
That passion and that desire to solve a problem for an entrepreneur has to be, it's just such part of your core. That is a really unique characteristic for a lot of people. But again, I'll go back to, what problem do you want to solve? Follow your curiosity. And I think that's really powerful advice for young people.
Great.
I agree with exactly what you said, Tim, and then James before. And I was going to take a little bit of a counterpoint to James, right? So of course you need to be passionate. You really need to care about what you're doing, finding that solution to a problem there, but also understand the most successful entrepreneurs are not afraid to have that hustle and grind, right? The 70, 80 hours a week, it's a grind. It's really a daily grind. So make sure you enjoy what you're doing, so that way that grind never feels like a bad thing. To me, I embrace the grind. Like, I love it, right? Every day I get up, I get to do what I want, what I enjoy doing, and so that grind never gets boring to me. And I'm not afraid to go out there and hustle, because I'm proud of what I'm doing, right? Of the solution that I'm offering is something I want to shout from the rooftop. So every day, that hustle and grind to me is important, but you still got to understand, like, sure, you can go work whatever for the post office, right? 9 to 5, and then you're all set. But this is literally the opposite of that. And so whoever said that, that 70, 80 hours to not work 40 hours is the truth.
And my biggest challenge is that my wife thinks I'm having so much fun that it's not work.
There you go. I love that.
So I don't get credit for it for being working.
Okay, Dave, do you want to add anything for your advice to the young people?
Yeah, I love the focus on problem solving, because everything can be framed from that perspective. Building an organization, putting the right people in the right place, it really is, solving a puzzle, and you have to be willing to apply that problem solving mentality in such a diverse set of ways when it comes to interpersonal relationships with team members, and building out the culture of the team and interactions with customers, and, product and roadmap, and, what does the business even do? What is our focus? So much of it is problem solving. I think a lot of it starts with having a real passion for understanding problem spaces and figuring out, innovative new ways, counterintuitive ways that these things can be solved. And, one of the things that I keep coming back to, though, is looking at what are the changes that are happening in the industry that present the opportunities. I'll tell you one, I don't know what it means and I haven't thought through it, but something that I find extremely curious and know that it's going to cause some disruptions and discontinuities is the fact that internet access is about to flip to where you have higher speed, more available internet access in rural areas, thanks to satellite constellations, than in urban centers.
That's Starlink you're talking about?
Talking about Starlink and Kuiper. It's going to change the world as we know it, because you're going to have higher bandwidth, lower latency, more connectivity in rural areas. And what is that going to mean for things? And you start thinking that through. What does it mean for real estate? What does it mean for this and that? What are how can it be used as a disruptive potential? It's that sort of thing that I like, is just looking for areas where, you're actually trying to find the application of new platforms that can be used in these areas.
Excellent. I want to thank you all for sharing your insights today. The conversation is robust and it doesn't end here. I want you all to take back this conversation and everything back to your organizations and your communities, where we all continue to try to drive change. We're going to be sharing the links for each of you and your Authority Magazine articles, as well as your websites, with this video, so you can each stay in touch and our listeners can find you. And as always, you can find me, Cynthia, at cynthiacorsetti.com, and Authority Magazine, as I continue to help leaders develop their teams and create their leadership succession roadmaps. So thank you all for your time today. This was a great conversation. Thanks for watching the Care to Lead podcast. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more videos and updates.